Hello everyone, I'm back for another video. Today we are going to be talking about the myth of the gender wage gap. And before you go, sexist, just hear me out. I'm going to try to come at this as factually and statistically as I can. And there's a lot of reasoning that goes with it as well. So I'm just going to jump right into it. The first thing people need to realize is that statistical disparity does not mean discrimination, right? It doesn't mean discrimination. That's something that if you ever take a statistics class, they will tell you that. You will learn that statistical disparity does not mean discrimination. It's kind of a tongue twister. So for example, Emma Watson, right? This great actor. She claimed that an example of sexism is that she's worked with more male directors than female directors. Now, that makes very, very little sense. How is it sexist that more men want to be directors than females? If you're saying, well, women are just held back in the film industry, that's not true. I'm very into film myself, and I follow a lot of channels on YouTube that do like film stuff, film tutorials, things like that. And I went in because, I was curious. I was like, well, are more men just interested in film? That sounds like a much more logical thing. So I went in and I looked. And I looked at the analytics for film channels, and I saw that the viewership on almost all of them was 90% male. Right? It was between like 85, 90%, not 95% male. So only 10% of film channels, at least like the 7 I looked at, only 10% are women viewers. So that right there, basic research that people like Emma Watson doesn't want to do, will show you that just because there is statistical disparity, more male directors, does not mean that they are discriminating against women like Emma Watson suggested. Second example for this, for the disparity and discrimination. There are not a lot of white people in the NBA compared to black people, but that does not mean the NBA is discriminating against white people. Right? If you think that, you're insane. So just because there aren't a lot of this in this doesn't mean that the people that there aren't a lot of are being discriminated against. That's the point I'm trying to get across, because that's what you need to understand in order to come at the wage gap, the gender wage gap, for a fair thing. So, the second thing to know is that facts, they can be misused very easily, right? Something that is true can be said in a certain way so that it sounds like you're saying something else is true, right? And that's what's happening with this 77% for, what men make statistic, right? It's a piece of information that's being misused to sound like men are being paid more simply because they have a penis, which is not true. So let's talk about where the 77% statistic comes from. It comes from some very simple math, right? Little Billy with his calculator, 5th grade, he could do this math. What they did is they took the annual median income of men and the annual median income of women, and they compared them. That's it. That's all they did. And if you compare them, and if you do the math, very basic, you take what women earned that year, the median, and what men earned, the median, and you get 0.77, right? And that's where the 0.77% statistic comes from. The very people that created that statistic, the people who did that calculation, admit they did not take into account the type of work, the level of work, or the time taken off. Right? They didn't account any of it. They just compared two numbers and they got that number. Right? So when Obama goes up there and he says, women make 77% of what men make, that is statistically true, but it's completely misleading because he's hiding the factors that make the statistic the case, right? So while he says that, and that's true, Obama's not lying to us. However, it's misleading. It's telling you one thing and making you think another thing, right? This is why no respected economist takes the gender wage gap seriously. There's just no reason to. They don't, right? It's just last year, a female economics professor at Harvard So someone at one of the most prestigious schools who is a female who studies economics for her life disproved the wage gap for the same reasons that I'm doing it here. So if you don't want to believe, a white privileged male, like I know a lot of you out there will call me, believe someone who is being claimed to be discriminated against. Right? They're able to prove just as easily as I am, probably more easily because they do this for a living, that it's just not true. Right? So let's talk about where that 77% comes from. It's from career choices. This is so clear and obvious. So let me prove it to you. Out of the 5 highest paying occupations, 4 of the 5 are male dominated. Out of the 5 lowest paying occupations, 4 out of the 5 are female dominated. So men tend to go to higher paying jobs. And that is why men make more money than women when you don't take into account what job they're working, right? I mean, this is common sense, people. Women are also more likely to take a day off for being sick than men are. Women are less likely to ask for a raise from their boss than men are. And women are also less likely to stay later into the night than men are, right? They just are. They're less likely to do it. So that's where this gender wage gap myth comes from, right? It's not even that hard to debunk. Really, you just use the reasoning that the people who created the statistic are using, and you can disprove it. They themselves say they didn't take into account hours worked, level worked, or anything like that, right? Men gravitate towards higher paying careers. That's not sexism. That's just what we're interested in. Men and women, we're not interested in the same things generally. Okay, we just aren't. Now, if you listen to this, I've given examples, I've used statistics, I've even cited people that do this for a living, and that you would say are being discriminated against. If you still don't believe me after all this and you're still like, well, he used facts, he used statistics, he used highly respected economics professors, he used logic. No, I don't buy it. Women are still being discriminated against. If you truly believe that, then let me just ask you this. And if you have an answer for me, please leave it down in the comments, because I actually want to know. Right? Anyone can disprove the gender wage gap with just this one question. If companies could get away with paying women less than men, why wouldn't they just hire all women to save money? Can you answer it? I mean, think about it. If a business wants to make profits, which obviously it does, they could cut expenses drastically by a quarter. Right? 77%, almost a quarter, nearly a quarter, they could cut their spendings. They would make so much more money if they hired all women, because they can just pay women less, right? So why don't they? It's because the gender wage gap just isn't true. Right? It's just not true. Okay? It isn't. Companies would hire all women if they knew that they could just pay them 77% for a dollar that a man makes. They would. They would make so much more money. The reason they don't is because, well, they can't actually pay women less. So either that or the companies are just really bad at math. Right? If you still don't believe me, then you would have to believe that. They're either just really bad at math or they don't know what they're doing. So that's going to be pretty much it for the video on the myth of the gender wage gap. I've explained everything to the best of my ability. Nothing I said in here was incorrect. Was it? Everything I said was backed up with statistics, with examples, everything like that. So that's going to pretty much wrap it up for today. If you still think the gender wage gap is real, leave a comment, answer my question. Why don't companies just hire all women to save money? If you can answer that, and it's actually a legitimate answer, and I don't have, a rebuttal to it that makes sense, then maybe you're right. Maybe we need to look into it some more. But if you can't answer it, and you think to yourself, well, yeah, why don't companies do that? Then maybe it's time to start thinking about whether the gender wage gap really exists. So that's going to be it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like, and I will see you guys in another one.